Hey teachers, this is Anna Yang. Welcome back to our Summer Hour Middle School Plus EL Programs Bite-Size PD. Today in episode 3, we are going to be taking a deeper dive into understanding access scores. So let's get this party started. This episode's objective is to be able to unpack a student's access score to figure out what exactly those scores tell us about our students' language abilities. We're going to take a look here at this set of scores that we saw in one of our last episodes. This is a 6th grade kiddo who took the access test in both 2019 and 2020. And we're going to take a look at the scores over here on the left because these are the most updated scores. What I hope you're noticing is that the access scores are broken down into each of the different language domains. And then we also see here these combined language domains of oral language, literacy, comprehension. And the very last set of scores down here that you're going to see is what's called the composite score or the composite proficiency level. The CPL is sometimes what we call it. So looking at the student score, you should notice that they have a 6 in listening. What does that tell us about their listening scores? That means that this student has some strong oral comprehension skills. When you're talking to them, they can actually understand what it is that you're saying. Kind of reminds me a lot of like when my kids were like just starting to speak, right? A lot of what they were saying to me was just unintelligible. Like I couldn't understand anything that they were saying. This is probably around 1 to 2 years old. But they could understand a whole lot of what I was telling them to do. I could ask them to go, pick something up off the floor. I could ask them to go sit down here or to come stand over here. And they could do those kinds of things. And so that definitely is a very consistent pattern in second language acquisition as well, where a kid is going to be able to have some strong comprehension skills before they have strong productive skills. So notice the next set of scores. His speaking score is a 1.9. A 1.9 is on the lower end of the proficiency scale. So this is going to be a kid who just has not developed a whole lot of confidence yet, or who hasn't really developed the skills and the ability to produce language through speaking. Reading and writing scores are both 2.9, and these are going to be more of your literacy, academic language-based scores, and so you're definitely going to see a middle-of-the-road kiddo here who is able to understand things you're saying, not going to produce a whole lot of language, and can do some pretty average EL writing in reading and understanding of what it is he or she's reading. So as a result, the oral language score, which is a score that comprises of both listening and speaking, is a 3.5. So oral language takes half of the listening score, half of the speaking score, and then that's how they get the 3.5. The next set of scores are the literacy scores. And so the literacy score is 50% reading and 50% writing. So when we take his reading and his writing, it's a 2.9. So that's going to be pretty easy to figure out. The third one is comprehension. Comprehension is a combination of reading and listening. So the reading score is 70% of this score and listening is 30%. Which is what pulls this student's comprehension score up to a 4.3. That has a lot to do with his listening abilities. And the last is going to be what's called the CPL, the composite score. And this is 35% reading, 35% writing, 50% listening, and 15% speaking. So when you take a look at the CPL, you can see, okay, yeah, this is going to be what we call your average EL. They haven't been here for a super long time, but they're not brand new either. And so as a result, they're in just that midstream of becoming fluent English proficient. The thing about the CPL though, is that it can often be misleading. And so we have to make sure that we're paying attention to all of the scores, looking at each of the domain scores to be able to truly understand what the student can do. And that's because receptive skills typically develop early on. So like I was saying earlier before, a kid who can listen, who has really strong listening skills, I mean, that's pretty typical of an English learner. And they're going to have strong reading skills. But we're talking about decoding skills here, though. Decoding does not really mean comprehension. This is like they can just take the words on the page and be able to read it and they might sound fluent, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're developing a whole lot of comprehension. But these are receptive skills and they do develop early on. productive skills are speaking and writing. These skills do take a little bit longer to develop. So I say all this just so that you understand that we have to make sure that we're using that CPL with caution. If you look only at the CPL, you might miss some very important information about your EL's language abilities. So for example, this kiddo here, if you saw that he has a 3.1, I mean, does he really truly have a 3.1 in everything? Is that how we got that score? Is that how we derived at a 3.1? Not really. So we have to make sure we pay attention to those domain scores. They can tell us a whole lot about where the students struggle and where they're really, really strong. Another thing that we need to make sure that we pay attention to and that we're considering is that we're using the scaled scores to compare year-to-year growth. The CPLs should not be used to indicate growth or a lack thereof. That's what it should say. Should not be used. So my bad. I need to go and edit that slide here. The CPL should not be used to indicate growth or a lack thereof. In my students, you'll notice they are called sub-scores. So we're going to go back to this slide over here, and you will notice that the sub-test score for listening in 2020 was a 436, whereas in 2019 it was a 380. So this kid did make some pretty significant gains in terms of their listening scores. So then if you take a look at the composite score though, you'll notice that from a 334 to 337, that's not a huge leap. But again, the composite score doesn't tell us the full story. So we really want to make sure we're paying attention to what's going on with this student. And you'll notice here too, if you haven't already, that this student's speaking score actually decreased. They went from a 290 to a 265, which is quite interesting. So it might have been a motivation issue, it might have been a confidence issue, it might have been the kid was sick and really just didn't want to speak that day. Who knows? There are so many different factors that we have to consider when it comes to these scores and why they look the way that they do. So looks like writing also came down a little bit. Reading didn't go up by much. And so that is going to impact the way that the rest of these scores look. But there are some gains. Okay, 335 to 351, 333 to 331. That was a little bit of a dip there. 359 to 382. So this is going to tell you a whole lot more. And this is the score that we really want to take a look at when we're trying to understand if a student is making the proper gains. So hopefully that gives you a really good idea, a good or a better or stronger understanding of what access scores tell us about students' language abilities. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to either Leah or to myself. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video.